Is Karen a slur? Yes, but it's not as bad. Is bimbo a slur? Yes, but it's not as bad. The N-word is like up here, okay, in terms of how bad it is. The C slur is like down here on the ground. There's such a gulf between the two, which is why it's hard for people to take the word seriously. That's why the nuance of this conversation seems to be lost on some people. So apparently, there's been a lot of interesting discourse around slurs. I'm not a big fan of slurs. You know, I'm gay, right? You know, I'm pansexual, technically gay, you know. I've had the F slur used against me, the homophobic one. And I don't use it even in my real life. I don't use it in my public life either. Regardless, I'm not a big fan, you know? Now, I used to have a past where I used to say the soft A in rap songs and stuff like that, but I don't even do that anymore. That was a long time ago too, but for full disclosure. Anyway, apparently, a lot of crazy stuff has happened in regards to one Hasan Piker. For those of you who don't know, Hasan is a live streamer, does politics, apparently ostensibly has played video games, though we don't see much of that nowadays. And he was banned, as it would turn out. So streamer bans Twitch partner Hasanabi. Hasan the Hun has been banned. This is his third ban, and you'll never guess what he was banned for. Apparently, you cannot say what will be henceforth referred to as the C slur or the C word on stream. You can't say it, especially not if you're calling other people it. But we'll get into that. For an abundance of caution, I am not trying to say the word, even though theoretically in this context I should be able to. Anyway, so I put out this absolute banger of a tweet, which all of my tweets are bangers. Twitter.com/ConurCC. Follow me if you don't already, you fool. This is a famous Southern style gift shop and restaurant, and the first word is what we're referencing. Anyway, so apparently, Hasan was watching MasterChef, an incredibly political, thought-provoking program featuring Gordon Ramsay, a person of color, because he's British. So already we're starting on a fairly political front. And apparently there was a contestant or a person who appeared on MasterChef who was being kind of an asshole, who was being kind of a not nice person to other people in the show. So his mods started referring to that person who was white as the C slur. And his mods in his chat started getting banned for having used the word. And it's interesting. It's not often you see people get banned for something like that, especially in the Twitch chat. So Hasan is obviously kind of upset about this, decided to talk about how the C slur is not, in his view, a slur. I don't know if he's changed his mind on if it's a slur or not. I'll give you my take in a moment. Or even if it is, it's not nearly as bad as other ones like the N-word or the F slur or the R slur. He ends up calling a Redditor whose comment he was reading that word. Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot more that happened there. Eventually, his VODs started getting deleted by Twitch, where he would say the word. You'd imagine Twitch would be like, hey, don't say this word. We're deleting your VODs because you're saying this word. Stop saying the word and you should be fine. We will stop deleting your VODs. You may not get banned. This is your warning. But apparently that didn't even happen. And Twitch has been known to be really bad about being clear and upfront about TOS violations and stuff like that. Pretty 1989 George Orwell's Animal Biscuits. But anyway, people on LSF start popping off about how the C slur is not good because it's targeting white people. It is a slur by definition because it's targeting people on their immutable characteristics. Typical contrarian or logic bro kind of Reddit debate lord, soy, milady, tip. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger type beat. Obviously, this enrages Hasan. Obviously, there are a lot of communities on the internet who are very excited to see Hasan face repercussions for these horrible transgressions. And then lo and behold, he did. That has what's led to this. He got a 7-day ban, apparently, for these transgressions. So it would seem that Twitch, given that action, has decided that using the C slur is a bannable offense. For some backstory, for some context, for a broader part of what I'm going to talk about today, I started watching Justin TV live streams because of StarCraft New, not just Destiny, but other people as well. I was just interested in the game. I ended up finding him through that process. I watch him, obviously, into when he's debating right-wingers and stuff like this. It eventually comes to the point where, and apologies if I'm misremembering this, a lot of this is from my memory, but it seemed like he was running into trouble with Twitch TOS about what words can you say on Twitch? Does the context matter? It seemed to be the case that he found out through talking to people at Twitch, and he might have caught a ban for saying a certain word in the context of a debate, not using the word against other people, but rather just talking about the word in a general sense, not using it as a pejorative. And then eventually he talks to Twitch moderators or admins or whoever else and finds out that if you use the N-word against other people, you get, in trouble for that, as you should. However, if you're talking about the N-word in the context of a broader conversation about the word itself and the history about it, theoretically, you could say the word and not get banned. And he actually did on stream and didn't get any kind of trouble for it because he used it in the correct context. This was some years ago. So that was interesting to me. Now, if we try to like extrapolate that to the context of what we're talking about right now with the C slur, the C word, in theory, I should be able to say it on my Twitch live stream, twitch.tv/ConureCC, right now, in this context, which I'm not directing at another person and not get in trouble. But I'm not going to risk it, for the biscuit, no pun intended. And it seemed like Hasan was using it against other people in regards to that one clip that went viral on LSF of him calling a Redditor the C slur. Now, Hasan gets banned, and then Vaush, little known YouTube politics streamer. I don't think many people in my community know him, and if they do, they might not like him very much, but he ended up streaming the night that Hasan got banned to go over the topic, give his thoughts, and deliver his opinions. Yeah, Vaush, the knockoff version of me, true. He was talking about the C word in the context of a broader discussion of slurs. He got banned for it too, which is the reason why I made this tweet. Twitch shooting Hasan and Vaush like fish in a barrel, if you will. And other people like Fawn, who is another Twitch partner, has gotten banned for it similarly. And it also, by the way, seems like if you say it in chat, especially directed at another person, you can also be banned even as a chatter, as Hasan's mods were. So be careful out there, I suppose. So the question of the day seems to be, is this word of this restaurant establishment, the first one, actually a slur? Now, there is a very easy, in my view, answer to this question, and that is yes. The term is used against predominantly white people in the modern context. Apparently, it may have originated as upper-class white people calling lower-class white people the term, and then eventually it was used by predominantly black people during the slave days against people who would crack whips, slave owners, slave drivers. It was used in a retaliatory way by black people against those white people. But obviously nowadays, the majority of the time the word is going to be used is specifically talking about just white people in general. So because it is based on an immutable characteristic of a person being white, it is technically a slur. Now, the follow-up question to that is, how bad of a slur is it? In my estimation, if you were to ask most white people in this country, if you were to ask them, hey, do you think the C slur is a slur? Is it bad? How do you feel when being called it? I feel like most people will be like, well, I don't feel very good about being called that, but it's not really a big to-do. It doesn't affect me too much. That would be my estimation. Like, most people just probably wouldn't care that much, just like simply being called it. But I can understand why people might feel some type of way about it, regardless of their ideology or whatever else, because it is an immutable characteristic. In my view, and this is my opinion, I do not think the C slur is the worst slur. In my view, it's not even close. If we're going to compare it to anything else, most people are trying to compare it to the N-word. Obviously with a hard R, is a slur that is directed and targeted at black people. It is a term that came from the slave days where black people, African people, were literally bought and sold as capital, as possessions, and they were exploited for their free labor. The word was being used to dehumanize them. It's really bad. Obviously, slavery was reprehensible. It is one of the greatest sins this country has ever committed, of many. So slave owners, the majority of whom were white, were calling black people the N-word as a means to dehumanize them. In that way, it is a slur used against them for the purpose of keeping them marginalized and keeping the white people's power over them. So if we analyze this through the terms of power dynamics, if we think of the C slur, well, the C slur came about and was popularized in retaliation to black people being subjugated and treated as less than human by white slave owners. Black people in that context were powerless. So to use the C slur against those white people in that context means almost nothing. It's essentially just a way to blow off steam. If we extrapolate that to the modern context, the C slur is used not against slave drivers or slave owners primarily, obviously, but is now used more in a general reference to white people. So is it as bad as the N-word? No, because in the current context of our society as we exist in it today, and we do live in a society, white people are still the majority power holders. They are the hegemonic power holders of this society. So a white person in the modern day calling a black person who are still marginalized in our society the N-word is egregious, because it is still a dehumanizing term that has roots in everything I just talked about in regards to slave days. However, a black person in the modern context calling a white person the C slur is not the same, because white people are still the hegemonic power holders. It doesn't affect them that much. Now, it's still a slur. It's just not as bad as the N-word. Is it as bad as the F slur? The homophobic one for gay people. I've been called that a lot because I'm pansexual and I dress the way that I do, right? Is it as bad as the F slur? No. because gay people, queer people in general, anybody in the LGBTQIA plus spectrum have been marginalized on the basis of their sexuality and gender identity for a long time and still are. White people are not a marginalized group. You benefit a lot from being a white person, actually. The next question is, what about things like bitch? Bitch is a gendered insult usually used against women. Is that a slur? Yes, but it's not as bad as the N-word. Is Karen a slur? Yes, but it's not as bad. Is bimbo a slur? Yes, but it's not as bad. Now, you still shouldn't use it, especially when it's used against women or feminine people. It is still not good to say, but it's still not as bad. Seems to be levels to this. The N-word is like up here, okay, in terms of how bad it is. The C slur is like down here on the ground. There's such a gulf between the two, which is why it's hard for people to take the word seriously. That's why the nuance of this conversation seems to be lost on some people. It's shocking that people would be banned. At the very least, we'd want Twitch to be very clear about why they're banning people. And it doesn't seem like they have been. And this is just typical Twitch behavior. Twitch has historically been very amoebic when it comes to their TOS and its application in regards to context. So Vaush and Hasan getting banned, just to dip into the drama a little bit more, outside of this very sterile context, a lot of the people, the communities, the content creator who kind of spearheaded and kind of took the side of the CU slur is not to be said, Hasan should stop, he should get in trouble for it, or whatever else, those communities, now I'm obviously speaking of DGG, but not just DGG, there's a lot of other people. Destiny was a big part of this and arguing in favor of it being a slur and it being not to be used or whatever else. I don't know how bad he thinks it is. I would be surprised if he thinks it's as bad as the N-word. But regardless, the irony is not lost on me that those people who seem to be fairly okay with or even excited about the fact that both Vaush and Hasan have been banned, not even like a year ago, were discrediting, sidestepping, and insulting leftists online for whatever arguments they were in by calling them white. That would be the common response. Don't care, didn't ask, plus you're white. That's the meme. Now, you could say a lot of that is memes, and I'm sure for some people it was, but it was certainly used by Destiny and his community and other people, not just him, to discredit leftists and left-wing opinions and broader arguments about policy, especially during the BLM protests over the previous summer, or the summer previous to that. The irony is not lost on me. Now, they didn't say the C slur. They didn't say that word, but they did attack people and discredit people's opinion on the basis of them being white, an immutable characteristic. Now, you could say that, oh, well, it was also used against them, white people, and also black and brown leftists who were also doing that to them because they were white. I do think it's silly to discredit the opinions of people because of immutable characteristics. I don't think you should do that. And that, I guess that could be one argument, but I don't know that that's all of it. And I think we'd be pretty naive to think that that's all that was. It was just retaliation. I mean, the discourse on this has just been a lot of fun. I put out a lot of banger tweets recently, as I often do all the time, but especially this past night. Just to be clear, white people in this country and around the world, they do still suffer in society, but it is often not because of their skin tone. If they look white, they still benefit from white privilege, especially in the United States. The majority of the discrimination that white people will face, especially in the States, is class-based. If they are a lower socioeconomic class, do still suffer under the current organization of our economy that we live under, capitalism, and have to work for starvation wages. You might have to work several jobs to make ends meet. Healthcare in this country is in an abhorrent state. It is a pay to win, essentially. There's a whole lot of things that go into being poor in this country, and white people are absolutely subjected to it. You're just not necessarily subjected to it because of your skin color. It's because of your socioeconomic status. And whiteness in a general sense is also very interesting because Polish people, Italian people, their skin tone is white, a lot of them anyway, but they still weren't considered white. The concept of whiteness is not simply you are white. In the past, if you were Polish, you were discriminated against because of your country of origin, because of your nationality, and you weren't considered white. As time has gone on and as society has developed, Polish people are now considered white. Italian people are now considered white, so long as your skin tone is white, by most people anyway. So saying that the C slur, which is primarily used against white people, is a slur based on the immutable characteristic of being white is kind of, amazing to me. considering the fact that being white means something different depending on when you were around. However, if you've been black, you've been subject to similar levels of discrimination. Chattel slavery is theoretically abolished in this country, though the 13th Amendment still allows for slave labor to be used in federal prison if you're convicted of a federal crime. A lot of black people have been convicted for dubious federal crimes like possession of marijuana, etc., and then are subject to that. Slavery still goes on in this country, it's just in our prisons, and not everybody convicted of a federal crime should necessarily be convicted of one, especially nonviolent drug offenders and other kinds of things like that. Regardless, if you've been black throughout the generations, you were subject to absurd levels of discrimination and marginalization and dehumanization, whereas being white has always been pretty beneficial. So it's just odd to conflate the two. If you're trying to say that the C slur is as bad as the N-word, you're out of your mind. I don't think anybody actually believes that. At least I would hope not. But anyway. And yeah, certainly depending on who you ask, certain people are still not white. So like, if you were to ask a racist person, a bigoted person, a Nazi even, am I white since I am half Latino? My dad immigrated from Honduras when he was 18, found my mom, made me, etc., I would not be considered white because I'm mixed. They would not consider me to be white if you get racist enough. While I do benefit from white privilege because my skin is white, as soon as people find out more of my ethnic background, if they learn all three of my names, which are incredibly fucking Latino sounding, my first name is Ramon, so automatically off the jump, we are not doing too well. I've actually had instances where I was pulled over by a cop, obviously a white cop, and this was also back when I lived in a more conservative part of New Jersey. I currently live in Seattle, haven't been pulled over here. The cop came up to me, I look white, and he was pretty chill. I also had my hair up because I was headed to work, so like my hair wasn't down and it used to not be as long. I used to still look a little bit more femme then, but that wasn't really a factor either. I just looked like a dude, a white dude at that. And he was like pretty normal coming up to me because I'd had interactions with the cops in the past, several of them even just walking down the street at night near my house. Eventually I give him my ID, my registration and all this. He goes back to his police car to, run the documents through or whatever. And then he comes back and I could actually see his demeanor change. And I can only infer that that's because he was able to read my names on the ID and find out that I happen to be of some sort of ethnic background, right? In this case, Latino. And I say this just to illustrate that you can still benefit from white privilege for your skin being white, but you will still be subject to discrimination should you be of a marginalized background otherwise. So for instance, you can be from any Latin American country. There are white Latinos in Latin and South America, but they're still white in skin tone, but they could still be subject to racism on basis of their country of origin or, ethnicity, being Spanish, Latino, whatever they consider themselves. Much the same as that there are black people in these countries as well. There are Afro-Latinos, there are Afro-Brazilians, there are black people all over the world. It's an interesting conflation that happens between nationality, country of origin, and race. That's very interesting. Oh, and really quickly, apparently, if you are black on Twitch, you can say the N-word with a soft A and be fine. And the only way I know this is because I've watched people do it on stream and they didn't get into any trouble. So the question would be, can white people say the C slur with a soft A and be fine as well? That's an interesting question. Now, the two people that I've referenced that have gotten banned are white or white passing. So Vaush is white, though I think he's Polish in descent. So he's, depending on what time you're living in, he's not white, but currently in this society he is. And Hasan is Turkish, so he's not fully white, depending on who you ask. But he's white passing. He calls himself white or white passing. So it is certainly interesting. It'll be interesting to see if any people of color get banned for using the word. But obviously that's a silly argument to have anyway, because the reclamation of the N-word by black people is not even close to would be the reclamation of the C slur by white people, which I guess is another thing we could touch on. The reclamation of slurs is a very interesting topic. Black people have reclaimed the N-word and they've altered it to use the soft A, but they might even use the hard R every now and again. And they have more of a reason to do it. People are more lax about it, especially with the soft A. It's just commonplace. Black people have had the N-word with a hard R used against them back in slave days, and then nowadays it's still used against them as a dehumanizing term. So black people had decided to reclaim the slur and used it as a term of endearment, which is a move that is meant to disempower the term and make it so that white people calling you it is not as bad as it once was, because hey, we call each other it, right? Black people call each other the word with a soft A as a term of endearment, so the word doesn't really mean that much. It's the same for any LGBT people reclaiming the F slur. I've also seen a lot of arguments about people talking about oh, well, Destiny has argued vociferously on this platform that it should be okay for people to use the N-word or other slurs in private. I don't think that argument being oh, well, this guy has argued that he should be able to say it in private. It's not the same as what's happening here. You can't really apply that to what Hasan got banned for, because he was, not always, but there were times where he directly used the C slur against people, and obviously that's on his public platform too. And in addition to that, I also see a lot of people talking online about, oh, well, Twitch can so quickly ban these streamers for being mean to white people, but trans and LGBTQIA plus people, myself included, I've got videos on this to that effect, have been the victims of hate raids for so long from people who are targeting them for their marginalized identity, being trans, being gay. And that's not really a fair comparison in my opinion either, because when people are getting hate raided, it's not another content creator being like, this person is, you know, whatever, slur or whatever. It's chatters and bots being flooded into their accounts. And you could say that, oh, well, Twitch has not addressed this problem as much as they should have, and I agree with that. So in this context, Hasan is using it on his public platform. He is the streamer. Whereas when it comes to hate raids, it's people in the chat, so it's not the same. There was somebody in chat who said, oh, the only people I've ever seen get mad about being called a C-slur were racists. I do seem to agree that a lot of the time that is the case. However, it also seems to be that there are a lot of contrarian, you know, logic lords out there, internet debate bros, that are also very excited to get, you know, performatively upset about it, insofar as it allows them to weaponize it against people they don't like. You know, like the people who are excited that Vaush and Hasan are banned. Very interesting stuff. So in summation, I don't think I agree with at least Vaush getting banned. Because as far as I'm aware, like I say, I don't think he used it against other people. The C-slur, his ban is very weird. Also, it was indefinite, which is not the same as permanent. If you get permanently banned, that's Twitch saying that you can never be unbanned, or it's incredibly unlikely that you are. Whereas an indefinite ban is just Twitch not giving a timetable. So that you could get unbanned at some point if you appeal. They're just not, you know, giving you a timetable for it. So Hasan got a 7-day ban. Twitch gave him a timetable. Vaush didn't get a timetable, so he's banned until he appeals, it would seem, or until, you know, Twitch decides to randomly unban him. He was just talking about it in the context of the conversation, and for that reason, the fact that he got banned is odd, and it's probably just because people don't like him, reported him in an attempt to get him banned, and they were successful in that, at least for now. Hasan, however, was technically using it against other people, so I think there is a better argument on Twitch's end for Hasan's ban, but the way that they went about doing it, and the way that they weren't super upfront about it is, you know, typical par for the course Twitch behavior, and that's kind of the part I don't agree with. I still think it's a bit silly to ban Hasan for it, but I can understand why it would happen. And if anything, you should have given him a warning and told him to stop doing it, and he probably would have. Regardless, free the homies, Hasan and Vaush. The C-slur, as we've been calling it, not nearly as bad as the N-word. Any comparisons of such is silly. When it comes to slurs, the C-slur is below literally anybody else who comes from a marginalized identity, like black people with the N-word, like LGBTQIA plus people with the F-slur and the T-slur, like disabled people with the R-slur, etc., etc. As far as I'm aware, people don't get banned for using the R-slur and calling people that. So, inconsistency from Twitch's moderation? Imagine my shock. Anyway, these are my takes, these are my opinions. I have the objectively correct opinion on the matter, and I'm glad you have enjoyed watching it, because I know you did. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Hit all notifications on. Leave a like if you like. Comment your opinion down below, because I'm sure it's as good as mine. And if it's not, then you're wrong. And have a good day. Oh, and also don't forget to catch my streams live, twitch.tv/conurec, every other day, starting around 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time. That's 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time every time. That's 8 and 9 Eastern for you people on the lesser coast, because I'd love to have you. It's fun to talk to the people in the chat, or you can just lurk or whatever. Anyway.